Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session of Coveted Conversations, brought to you by Community Social Justice Atlanta and MEL, Mentoring Exceptional Leaders. I am Dr. Adrienne A. Gardner, and I'm going to be the host of this panel for you tonight. So I'm going to ask you to get ready to share, to invite your friends, family, community to tune in. We have a lot of exciting information for you this evening. Community Social Justice Atlanta got started last year, maybe around about May, and we have just been moving with all things social justice as it relates to the community. You've seen, we talked about voter suppression, we talked about race, religion, and racism. We talked about voter mobilization, domestic violence, everything and anything that has to do with your well-being as members of the community are things that we like to speak about. If there are issues or topics that are prevailing to you, please let us know. You can send us a message, put it in the chat. We will be more than happy to pull together resources to be able to address those issues, because this is truly about the community and the issues that are around that. What we're going to be doing tonight, and I'm going to bring the panel into you very shortly, is that during this last year, aka the pandemic, our students, our children have suffered academically for a variety of factors. What we're going to do tonight is have a candid conversation. I call it a straight up no chaser discussion around the things that are impacting your children, our children as a community, the students, from a social and an emotional standpoint. We've talked about, are we ready to come back to school? We've talked about the ways in which we need to prepare to make sure that we are addressing the issues around COVID-19. What we really want to do at this point now is speak to the hearts and the minds and the emotions of our students, because we know that that is what is most important in terms of their academic and social adjustment. So what I'd like to do now is bring on our first guest, which is Raquel Moss. I always say, come on down, come on in, Raquel.
Hi, how are you?
Great, great. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
So I am Raquel Moss, and I am the graduation coach at the McDonough Middle School in Henry County. And we have a saying, are the children well? And our answer is always yes, they are, because we are well as the staff. So, we have the wonderful leadership of Larita Wiggins. And so I'm super excited about this opportunity to share the great things that we're doing at McDonough Middle.
Well, we are glad to have you on board. Welcome, relax, and just share the information from your heart. I want to introduce to you as well, our next guest is Miss Deborah Green. Come on down, Deborah.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Gardner. It's so wonderful to be here again. My name is Deborah Green. I am the wife to Tommy Green, a doting mother to Dorian Green, and also the proud assistant principal at Eddie White Middle Academy. I'm so glad to serve in our Wolfpack Den. Where we are standing Wolfpack strong, even in the midst of a year-long pandemic. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to the wonderful and vibrant discussion that I know that we're going to have this evening.
Well, thank you so much and welcome on board. Next up is Dr. Gurnell Grisby.
Hello.
Come on down.
How are you?
We are doing well. Please introduce yourself to our audience this evening.
For sure. My name is Cornell Grisby. I'm a school psychologist by trade, also a full-time entrepreneur and business owner. I have an education consulting company in Fayetteville, Georgia, and we look to help parents, educators, and graduate students better serve urban students and urban schools. So I'm really excited to be here this evening.
Great, great, great. Well, definitely looking forward to hearing all that you have to share with us. Our next panelist I want to introduce you to is Miss Shakira Rice. Come on down, Shakira. We cannot hear you, Shakira. I hate to interrupt what you're saying. You need to come up.
Oh,
There you
sorry
go.
about that.
That's
You
okay.
was so good too, Dr.
I know
Gardner.
it was. I could read it all in your face.
It was good. But good evening to Dr. Gardner, the esteemed panel. I am Shakira Rice, the proud principal of North Clayton Middle School. We are located in the 30349 zip code, and we like to say our village is strong in the 30349. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to these rich discussions tonight.
Thank you so much. I knew it was organic because it came right back out, right? And last up for our panel is going to be Dr. Ralph Simpson. Dr. Simpson, come on down.
Greetings, 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 and salutations. Good evening. Thanks for making me a part of such a wonderful event. I hail from the mighty Clayton County School Districts, and I bring greetings on behalf of our Board of Education and our Superintendent, CEO, Dr. Morcease J. Beasley, where I serve as the Deputy Superintendent for School Leadership and Improvement. So this beautiful sister, Shakira Rice and Deborah Green, I have the wonderful opportunity to supervise such exemplary leaders, which makes my job so much easier. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And we're going to jump right on into this conversation. As I had stated a little earlier, this pandemic, what we have gone through over this last year, because it is a year now, March 19th, this is full circle. A lot of things we've talked about a lot of things around school and education. One of the subjects that we've touched on, but now we want to dig deeper into is this social emotional learning piece. And so what I'd like for each of you to do, and I'm going to start with you, Dr. Simpson, is from your perspective, I want you to help our audience understand what it is that we're talking about when we use the words social emotional learning.
Wow.
Dr. Simpson?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. That's a wonderful question and a good way to start, because that is actually the way we start in Clayton County every single day. We start our day out with an SEL activity or an SEL moment. So that's permeated throughout the district, as we are an SEL district. And just to let you know, or the audience to know how we began, how we got to where we are. We knew that we couldn't start this school year out as business as normal, because it was not normal. While content, math, science, English, and social studies is critical, we all recognize that you got the Maslow before you bloom, that there are needs that had to be met before we could actually get to the process of beginning to teach. And so we started having a conversation about what our children needed, but not just our children, what did our adults need? So here we have the mantra, you have to reach before you teach. And what does that look like when you say reach before you teach? We needed to provide our teachers, our adults, with some strategies and some nuggets so that they could better be equipped to build foundational relationships that's based on genuine love, care, and concern. That we have to check the pulse. You know, during this whole pandemic, you walk into a building and someone to stick out a thermometer to test your temperature. But we needed to check your heart. And the only way we felt best that we could check your heart is through social emotional learning. The difficulty of actually establishing a relationship via a computer was going to be extremely challenging, because teaching and learning is a very intimate process and concept. You know, the high fives you walking down the hallways, the hugs that you give the children in the morning, we could no longer do that. So we needed to equip and provide our teachers with something extra so that they would strengthen those relationships that they will build based on genuine love, care, and concern. So myself, along with my professional learning director, we took this proposal to our superintendent, shared it with the board. They agreed and supported us. And now we are an SEL district. And that's what it means to us. It means that we have to know, it's simply, if you ask children at the beginning of every classroom who's ready to learn and who's not ready to learn, you have identified and assessed and diagnosed the temperament, the pulse, the climate of what's going on in that classroom, and then what may have happened to that child the night before. And if they answer that question and say, I'm not ready to learn, then it's a responsibility of myself to step outside, meet me at the door, and let's go over here in this chat room so we can have a conversation real quick, just so that I can equip you with some skills and some nuggets so that you can navigate through your day. And that is a common theme in practice. Every single day starts out that way in our classroom. Every principal's meeting starts out, or every administrator's meeting starts out with an SEL moment. Every cabinet meeting starts out with an SEL moment. So we believe that SEL, or social emotional learning, is not something you do, it's who you are.
Dr. Simpson, that was a fantastic way to get us started. Thank you so much for that. Raquel, please add to that. What does social emotional learning mean from your perspective?
Well, we start with, like Dr. Simpson said, we start each day knowing the reason why we're there. Education is a ministry. When we step into the building, we greet each other as a staff, and then the expectation is to greet the students. So, my thing is, welcome to school. I call them sir and ma'am, young ladies and gentlemen. So if I don't know the student's name, their name is that. So who are you? Is I always ask them. And they will definitely say, I am. And they, this sense of pride, culture, diverse. And we love it at McDonough Middle. Sense of gratitude and just coming to work is a joy. I don't like to miss a day because I know that it's something that I am going, or someone I'm going to inspire, whether it's my staff member or it's a student. So I'm excited. I come with excitement each and every day. So like Dr. Simpson said, it is imperative that we are the models.
Yeah.
If they don't see us excited about coming to work,
Right.
they're not going to be excited about getting off that bus. So a greeting, a hello is absolutely a must.
Well,
And at
I appreciate
McDonough Middle, that's exactly what we're going to give you.
I appreciate that. I'm starting to feel the excitement across the screen. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's definitely there. Go ahead, Dr. Deborah Green, Ms. Green, please add from your perspective, how would you define for our audience what we mean when we talk about social emotional learning?
Yes, with social emotional learning, first of all, I want to applaud Dr. Simpson and our leadership for even bringing this to Clayton County. It has been such a wonderful blessing for our children. Because when you're talking about social emotional learning, you are talking about being very, very self-aware of how you are feeling, having your emotions in check, being emotionally healthy, not just for yourself, but for others, for your community, how to engage with others appropriately, foster those healthy relationships, those healthy behaviors, instead of trying to solve conflict with weapons or with fighting or anything of that nature, to use the words that would promote healing, that would foster love and care and compassion, sympathy and empathy, putting yourself in your neighbor's shoes to really lean on doing unto others as you would have them to do unto you. That those types of principles, and it is seeping into our children. We are seeing so much positivity coming from our SEL that we indeed do implement every single period. And it also provides an opportunity for those of us who are educators to get into the heart of the children and recognize that there is an issue or if there is a problem, to assist them in becoming a true village with the parents and problem solving. So we are able to pull in counselors, social workers, additional leaders who can really, truly, as Ms. Ma said, minister to our children. And that's what
Absolutely.
they need during this time. And we're even seeing some of the parents benefiting from our social emotional learning as well. So it has truly been a blessing for our entire community and for our entire school district.
Well, great. Thank you so much for bringing that into the space. I want to come back to part of that in terms of the parents picking up, but I also just want to get the other voices into the room. Dr. Grisby, you introduced yourself as, if I recall, like at least two cats, entrepreneur and also in the school system. So
Yes.
you may be seeing this social emotional learning from a variety of perspectives, but I wanted you to chime in and just give your definition of what that means.
Absolutely. So as a school psychologist, I tend to kind of get all the intense emotions from the teachers, from the parents, from the students, and kind of having to make sense of that is ideally what I do on a regular basis. So I was in the schools, and I think it's really important that we have this initiative now. It warms my heart to hear so many educators who are understanding that we need to address the emotions that students are feeling, and also supporting the families as well. So that kind of, we can do a lot at the school, but we can't do everything. And if we don't get the parents on board, it's going to be really hard, because every day we're starting over, and that can be very exhausting. So when I found out that Clayton County had this initiative to do SEL learning in the beginning of classes, I thought it was a great idea, because again, we need to teach the students at home so that they can manage some of the difficulties that they're experiencing that they often bring to school, but now they're not leaving the home. So it's kind of, it's good to see it come full circle. And I also work in private practice, so oftentimes I'll have different conversations with parents that I can't often have in the schools. And so it's nice to be able to see that kind of, we're bridging that gap now, because the emotional things that are difficult for schools to address, they can do that a little bit more now. And I think it makes it a lot easier to be an educator when students are more self-aware of what's going on inside of them, and as well as inside of the other people that are around them as well. So all good stuff all the way around.
Absolutely. That emotional social health is very critical to us being able to teach and to receive and to learn. Go ahead. Let's hear from you, Shakira. You're a recurring panelist. I feel like there's a little bit more of a friendliness there, but
Celebrity.
please, Shakira, celebrity.
Yeah.
No.
but please go ahead and share your perspective, Ms. Rice.
And again, being a building leader, I echo what Miss Dr. Green said. We're so grateful to have Dr. Simpson bringing that vision to bring an entire SEL platform to our district. We have Rethink Ed. We have a structured curriculum where SEL learning is taking place with that curriculum. But there are a lot of negative things associated with the pandemic, but at North Clayton Middle School, we like to look at the positives. And one main positive is now you have the scholar, the parent, and the school all housed in one building, because oftentimes we see the parents right there side by side with our scholars. So the parents are listening to the SEL lessons. They're getting involved with those. So you have the best of both worlds, because right now it's hard for everyone. Our scholars have been home for over a year now. So there's anxiety not only with the scholars, but with the parents as well, because now it's 24/7 in the house together, and they're having to shift roles to assist the scholars at home. So those SEL lessons are not only helping the scholars, they're also helping the parents as well to know how to interact together in a positive way. But I will also say, being a building leader, I had to make it a priority before anyone else would make that a priority. So what I did was I made sure I assigned that to one of our assistant principals to take the charge with that. And under the leadership of Dr. Shakira Cheney, our SEL platform has taken on a whole nother level, because she has assigned all of the educators and adults, faculty and staff in the building, an SEL buddy. So that means that not only are the kids participating in SEL, the SEL buddies, we have to check in with each other at least twice a week to make sure we're okay as the adults. And also she assigns the SEL lessons for adults to us to do as well. So it's been a win-win. And again, I just thank Dr. Simpson's for having that type of vision to bring that to our district.
Wow, that sounds so fantastic. I don't think we were meant to live in this world alone. So when you talk about those relationships and building, that can only secure the foundation. But you all have touched on something that I want to get to as well. It appears as if, now this of course is not in all situations, that the pandemic may have caught some parents off guard, because you already mentioned we're all in the same space. So now they may have felt in the beginning, it seems that there may be a transition, but a feeling of helplessness, because now they have become the teacher in a one-room classroom if they have multiple children, trying to monitor and maintain, in addition to the other roles that they played: parent, spouse, entrepreneur, employee, whatever that may be. So speak to that from the the way in which SEL, and you started talking about that already. So, Deborah Green, if you will pick that up, speak to the point that allows us to incorporate social emotional learning and also the parents, because they are now in a new role. And initially, they may have felt a little apprehensive, some anxiety. How am I going to do this? So if you would start us off with that conversation, Deborah, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, one thing the pandemic, as you all have already spoken to, it has provided, and Ms. Rice reiterated this, it has provided an opportunity for us to really bridge the gap between school and home, because the parent is right there. Quite often, the parent is, in the room, as you said, Dr. Gardner, with the child. So they're hearing what many of our teachers are saying. They're hearing the lessons that are being provided. They're hearing the SEL. They're hearing the angst that may be in the classrooms from the students. They're hearing also the teacher as well as other students comforting those students who may have some angst or have presented an issue or something that they are going through. And they're hearing that ministry bubble up. And I have seen parents be delighted to hear, Miss So-and-so, I happened to overhear your lesson. I was in the kitchen and it just blessed me. I just need you to know I feel what you're doing. It ministered to me. I have we even go as far as the physical aspect of it, because of course we all know that when you're feeling better, you perform better. And even the physical aspect of it, of some of our teachers encouraging our students get up to move. And this is outside of the PE teachers. These are just caring teachers who want to speak and minister to the whole child. That is also part of it as well. So that when they're feeling better physically, then that social and they're coming together to want to learn, and also and to socialize in a healthy way with their peers. And it has extended to parents, to where even parents are like, I was in the background doing some of those exercises with some of our children, and it made me feel better. So of course, then you have parents that are feeling better, and they begin to, of course, minister to their children in a more productive way. This has happened time and time again because of that social emotional learning connection, and them coming back to some of our teachers, our assistant principals, our admin and counselors, and saying, thank you all so much for doing that, and really holding hands with us and creating that village that our children desperately need.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. You picked up on another one, the village. Dr. Grisby, talking about that from a village standpoint, because as you're speaking, these are parents who have been out of school for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're getting involved with their children to try to make sure that they stay on task. It almost seems as if we are trying to bring back family values from a pandemic standpoint. And nobody but God could come up with that formula to get us back where we need to be. But what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Grisby?
So I think it's really important that we're aware of how important families are when we're trying to make a change in a child's life in any regard. So education is just one piece of it, right? But in private practice, one of the things that I love to do the most is the family therapy aspect, because I can see a child one-on-one, even if I was working in the school still as a school psychologist, but I can see a child one-on-one in therapy and get to the root of the issues that they're experiencing. But without educating the parents on how to bridge that gap between the child and parent, I'm sending the child back into a damaged situation. And oftentimes the parents may not see the results that they anticipate because there's a disconnect. So being able to have parents and students or children in any regard communicating better from a social emotional standpoint is really important, because that communication is lifelong. And so I do see a lot of parents have anxiety because they want to prepare their children for life, to 18. They think like, that's the expiration date. Like, I have 18 years, and if I don't get it all in 18 years, if they're not perfect, I failed as a parent. And that's like, you are your child's greatest teacher for the rest of their life as their parent. And so what I do realize is a lot of times parents don't know their emotions. They don't understand when they feel sad, from when they feel hurt, from when they're disappointed, from when they're exhausted. So we have like mad, happy, and angry. I feel like those are the emotions that people tend to go for. And so educating students is important, or children is very important, but we also need to teach the parents these words so they can model and they can explain to themselves, validate their own feelings first, and then you can validate your child. But, you know, with COVID, what I think has been really helpful is that parents are now being able to see the emotions that they feel during the day. They're now seeing their children feel it. You know, what does that look like when you're exhausted from sitting in Zoom calls at work? Now you have to see your child sit in Zoom calls for school. You know, I think it's building a different level of compassion that we really needed, because that's been gone for a very long time. And, you know, if we bridge that gap, then there's no stopping the family, like that rebuilding of the family. But we have to be aware of what we feel and validating those emotions. But that's a whole nother, you know, that's a whole nother avenue that we can get on. And that's why therapists are here. Everyone go to therapy. It's great. But, yeah.
I heard, yeah, that becomes part 3, 4, 5. I mean, it's an ongoing conversation, but for sure, for sure. But again, you brought up some additional pieces in terms of putting this puzzle together. When we look at expecting children to be able to use their words and express their emotions, when oftentimes the parents don't even have the words to express their emotions. And when those two things come together, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have that clash. So what I'm hearing, and Deborah, if you would, pick us up on this part of the conversation as well. And then Shakira, I want to hear from you as well. The soft skills, empathy, compassion, those to me seem to be foundational pieces that not only serve the student in the classroom, but it also serves the family members at home. So talk a little bit more about some of those soft skills, the empathy, the compassion, the things that you are teaching to this social, emotional, and learning perspective.
So one of the things that I'm seeing our teachers doing is modeling. One of the things that we began, and modeling empathy and compassion, because we don't know what's going on the other side of that screen, truly. And so the teachers have been modeling that. We at Eddie White Middle Academy, the entire pandemic, have been saying grace and mercy. And because it's something that we all need. We all have our pandemic moments. I don't care how much of an introvert you are. We all have those pandemic moments where we're feeling very, very closed in. And so we model that for our children. We want our children to, instead of leaning toward bullying or casting blame, we want them to say, now, how would I respond if something like that had happened to me? Or we really don't know what's going on. I haven't walked a mile in my peers' shoes. And so we, as educators, we try to model that for our children. We try to use teachable moments, as we call them, to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not how we respond. That's not an appropriate response. We're not responding with empathy. And then we bring in the lessons. If, teachers that are picking up on that, they'll bring in a lesson from Rethink Ed and say, this is something that we need to discuss. Appropriate responses when people are, we're finding that our peers are going through something. This is something we need to discuss, how you appropriately respond and show empathy. And it is our hope that this is not just a teachable moment, but this goes into life skills that we practice over and over again for eternity.
Thank you so much. Shakira, what do you have to add to that discussion, that comment, that question? We can't hear you. Unmute.
I am so sorry. I will get that right, Dr. Gardner. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. It's technical issues. That's all.
Just like Deborah Green said, grace. That's we've been talking and using that word grace the entire school year. That's grace and mercy, grace in grading, grace in our interactions with our kids. And then we take it a step further. We always say that we are each other's brother and sister's keeper. And that holds all of us accountable to each other. But more importantly, it holds us accountable to be the best that we can be, because I know that you are counting on me to be my best. So that means you must be your best for me. So that means if something is wrong, I need to try to talk about it and fix it so that I can then be my best for you, because we're counting on one another. So those are just some soft skills and opportunities for learning that we are trying to embed into our virtual learning with our kids and our parents.
Thank you so much for that. I want to just make sure that those who are joining in with us, welcome you to another session of Coveted Conversations, brought to you by Community Social Justice ATL. If you haven't picked up on it yet, we are having a straight up, no chaser, let's get to the point conversation around the soft skills. How do we teach our children to be socially and emotional learners so that they can then take into the knowledge? If you have any questions or comments, please put that into the comment section. You can also share this information, watch party, whatever needs to be done, because we recognize that this is a conversation. These are things that we generally don't talk about, but they are truly foundation builders. What I want to do at this point, and I have it written down, so I don't want to get off script too much, but there were some statistics, Dr. Simpson, and I think you brought that up in your general piece, but let me share with you something that I found. It says that 14% of families with children have reported or experienced food insecurities. And you were talking about some of those other things. I used to teach math. How can I expect to teach math if they're coming in hungry?
That's
If
right.
there are other things that are going on in their lives. So the question is, if we know that 14% have reported that, I'm going to assume that the number may be greater, but how does that impact where they are academically, and how is the social emotional learning going to be able to supplement those pieces so that we can get the students in that space of who's ready to learn and all the hands go up? Dr. Simpson, what would you say to that?
Wow. So yeah, that's a loaded question. One, um, Ms. Rice mentioned and Ms. Green talked about grace and mercy. I equate that to compassion over content, and that's been our message, throughout from the beginning of the school year. Yes, we know the content is there, but we have to display a level of compassion. One of the things that we recognize, obviously, is that a child that is hungry, I don't care how good of an English or math teacher you are. Listen, if I'm hungry, I don't hear nothing. I don't hear nothing you talking.
Amen.
I hear my stomach growling.
That's right.
So when I mentioned earlier about made the comment, you have to Maslow before you bloom. That's exactly what I meant. You got to meet the basic needs first. We spend so much time, and I know that we're assessed as educational leaders based on the level of academic success or academic achievement. Yes, the test scores, but I'm a firm believer that if you want better scores, you got to get better people. How do you get people better first? Because children are going to remember what we did for them and what we did to them. They're going to remember. You think a child going to remember 5-10 years from now what the school CCRPI was, a graduation rate? They could care less about that. But they're going to realize that at North Clayton Middle School and at Eddie White Middle School, that Miss Green and Miss Rice knew that the teachers at their school had some snacks in their closet just in case my stomach might be growling. So it's important for us to have teachers to display that level of compassion. But one thing, they have to recognize it. Every issue, all misbehavior is not necessarily directly related to a discipline problem. Me being hungry and a lack of food, that is a traumatic experience for a child. That's trauma. So if we don't recognize that as being a traumatic situation, those are adverse childhood experiences that our children bring to the schoolhouse every single day and then in the classroom. And that if I, as a teacher, don't realize that something has happened to make this child act the way they do, thusly impacting the way in which they learn, So I always ask, and I ask the leaders this, when we see a child displaying inappropriate behavior, when we see people doing something just completely off the wall, the first thing we say in our mind, what's wrong with them? What? But I challenge us all to just change that up a little bit, reword that. Instead of saying what's wrong with them, ask this question: what happened to them? Because something happened that caused for them to act that way. So think about if teachers internalized it and they manifested that, and they, instead of say what's going on, what's wrong with them, ask the question, what happened to them? And then when you get to that answer right there, it makes you want to dig a little bit and inquire about what's going on, what's really going on. And when you find out what's really going on, then your whole process, your whole intent, and your whole approach, the way in which you deal with that child or those children, are going to change. But we have to be very, very, very cognizant of and knowledgeable and aware of what those traumatic situations that's occurred with that child or those children look like, so we don't confuse them with it being a discipline problem. Last thing I want to say about that: I worked as a corrections officer for 4.5 years. My last 2.5 years was spent at the jail. I couldn't understand until I left that they would arrest people who obviously, it was very, very obvious that they had mental illness issues, and they brought them to jail.
Mhm.
Didn't understand for the life of me, why didn't they take them to a place where they could be treated? So you bring them to jail, we isolate them in a cell, and they were never treated. These people were never treated. And then after 10 or 15 days, they just release them back to the street. Listen, a lot of discipline problems are precipitated by a mental illness.
Mhm.
And in education, in public education, the state of Georgia, Department of Education, has not accepted the fact that we need mental health advisors as full-time employees in our school
Mhm.
district, so that we can train, equip, and inform our educators about what mental illness looks like. Because if we do that, then we immediately address what the challenges are and stop putting a band-aid on it and stop kicking children out of class and out of school.
You have said a word and a half, Dr. Simpson.
That took me
Dr.
straight to
Simpson.
church, okay?
I'm, I'm telling you. But Raquel, what would you add to that? Because again, the emotion and the compassion from which you presented that, Dr. Simpson, I'm certain that
Yes.
that's what the rest of you are doing in your spaces. So just add to that. Pick up wherever you need to pick up
Yeah.
on Raquel.
Absolutely. I will amen and shout all of that. Okay. Because because I'm also the wellness coach. So one thing that we have done in Henry County is focus on the spiritual wellness, which is much needed. Spiritual wellness for Black kids is who we are as a people. And we must provide nutritious options in our schools. So when they're coming hungry, we want to show them drinking water, eating apples, eating their vegetables, because we know that that produces good mental stamina. And so we see that a lot of our kids are not eating healthy. They're not making good choices. So we also know that, choices is something that they are really struggling to make. And when we look at our, health surveys, decision making, they confused about just simple decisions, and so it's like they come to school and sometimes they have chips. And we like chips. We like the snack, right? Don't we, educators? Yes, we do. But when I go to the meetings, I make sure I have nuts, fruit, alkaline water. I do yoga, so all of those components to help us mentally and spiritually is who we are as a people. And so when kids feel that and we show that in the classrooms and we're modeling that, modeling is so important. important what we're putting in our mouths. So I'm like, hey, come and get these nuts and fruits and berries. So, not just for testing purposes, it is for everyday life. Everyday life. So put them Takis away, parents. That is not helping our kids. All the, Gatorade. This is not the sport. Okay. They need water. They need water to flush out the impurities in their bodies. Yeah. So we have to teach those things. And people say, you the yoga guru, Raquel. And I'm like, well, I've been doing yoga and practicing it for 7 years, and I see the difference in my own health, my own mental space. So absolutely, I'm going to give them to the kids. They're humans just like me. It helps me to make good decisions. So, and for our boys, don't let me talk about the handsome boys, okay? That's my heart right there, because they are the kings of the pulse, right? Alongside the queens. But however, we must eat properly. We must exercise properly. So we got to show that. So yeah, I do some Zumba and some chair exercises. I do some Zen. I do all of those things to balance their mind, quiet their heads so that they can think. So that right there is a must in our schools. And I'm so glad Henry County adopted that to go with PVIS and Second Step and all the wonderful programs that we do. But if we don't quiet that noise in our heads and call on a higher calling.
All right.
You don't supposed to have church in school.
All right.
Miss Moss does, because that's what's in my heart. It is who I am. It is the heartbeat. And I love the Black culture. I love my boys for sure. I love my girls too, because we do Sankofa. But all of that is so important. Dr. Simpson, you are absolutely right, sir. So it is a yes and an amen for me.
What I hear you saying is that there is no shame to it, because what's happening is that you're demonstrating it as educators, as you're modeling it for them, and you're not making them feel less than or shameful because they don't. And in that process, you then teach them a new skill, and that new skill can transfer back to family and into the community. And that's what we're trying to do. The other thing you mentioned, and Shakira, I want to get you to chime in as well. One of the things that I was always puzzled about was when they said they took prayer out of school. Well, maybe they did, but did they take it out of us? So when you speak, Raquel, about, and you all have said that, grace and mercy, and our cultural and our spiritual background and foundation, as long as it's in us and we are in the school, then it's still there. There may be creative ways that we need to be able to do that, but again, it's about modeling those things. So Shakira, from the standpoint of pulling all of these pieces together, I want to add, and of course, come from where we were before, but I want to add another layer to this as well. Mm-hmm. When I look at from the standpoint of isolation, the pandemic, when it took us out of the brick and mortar, the students have now become isolated from what they normally knew, their friends, their sports teams, whatever it was. And another statistic came up that was saying that teen suicide had increased by maybe about 10% or so within that year, within the last year. Whether or not it's strictly about COVID, but it's inside, it's a factor to that. How do you address, and Dr. Simpson, I love when you say that you start from Maslow before you get to the curriculum and to the academics, but how do you address that these are just normal, typical stages that our young people are going through, but when they feel so isolated or alienated, if they only see their way out through suicide, what else can we do from a social and an emotional standpoint to give our children, our students, the hope that it is much more beyond where you are right now? Hold on. Like you say, grace and mercy. What do you say to that, Shakira?
Okay, thank you for that question. That is good, because I'm being a former coach and a former athlete. Sometimes we have to stop when you read the defense and change up your offense. So at the beginning of the year, towards I guess about a month or two into the year, we realized that very thing there. We realized that our kids were getting isolated because sometimes the schoolhouse is the safest place for a child for various reasons. So we started to kind of see some things pop up. So we stopped in mid-game and revamped our play. So we readjusted the schedule to then allow clubs and organizations to be a part of the normal school day, and even in a virtual setting, because that gave the kids a chance to still be together, even in a virtual environment, with not their teacher, but with their coach, with their sponsor, with someone they already have that relationship with. And then we took it a step further. We then began doing drive-throughs and drive-bys because the kids still needed to see us in the physical realm instead of the virtual realm. So we celebrate any accomplishments with the kids. Every 9 weeks, the kids will come to the school for a drive-through honor roll celebration. The teachers go into the community just to kind of give high fives and say, guys, you did a great job on that. So sometimes you have to kind of stop. You may have the best plan in the world, like Dr. Simpson said, but when you're really present and in this game, you have to stop and make a mid-game adjustment to make sure that you're going to get to that end zone. So those are some things we did to make sure we kept our scholars in the game and kind of had that mental health check with them to keep them engaged with their peers.
Wonderful, wonderful. I am aware that our hour is about up, so I'm gonna have to try to pull some of it back. But I want to give you, I mean, this has been fantastic. I mean, you guys have shared, I know, based off the comments that are coming in, that are helping people to get a really good appreciation about what we do and how we care for our students and our children. Because at the end of the day, what I'm hearing all of you say, relationships first.
Yes.
That's what makes the difference. The education, the curriculum, the test scores, none of that will come if we don't have a foundation of compassion, relationships, and caring. So Dr. Grisby, in kind of our closing remarks, I'm going to give all of you an opportunity to address this and anything else that you want to speak to before we have to wrap up. But in your opinion, how might we approach education, teaching, and learning as we move forward past this pandemic, based off of what we have been able to learn while we're in the pandemic? Your opinion only. Go ahead, Dr. Grisby.
So that's a great question. There's so many ways that we can go with that. For sure, I think the social emotional learning is a great start because we often have to remember we can't give what we don't have as adults, as educators, as parents, or, children, all of that. So, and kind of better understanding that, I think we have to realize how we're feeling and then what we need. So some students are actually thriving in virtual school, and we validate that. And we accept that this is probably where they should have been all along. And some of those kids are students who struggled in the brick and mortar, but we weren't able to see that excellence because of other factors that they were battling. So now that they have an advantage at home, some students who are struggling at home need to get back to the building because that's important for them. That social piece may be what they need. So kind of figuring out like how we feel, validating those emotions, understanding what those emotions are, and then kind of meeting the students where they are is really important. One of the things that I often tell teachers when I work with them is a student who knows what to do is often going to do what they know to do, right? Like it sounds simple, but if a child can do it, they're going to do it. Most kids want to see adults happy. They want to please others. When a child does not know how to do something, typically we want to ask, is it a can't do or a won't do? And that could be in anything. So are they struggling right now because they can't do what we're asking of them and we're putting a lot of pressure on them, or are they not doing it because they don't want to? And to Dr. Simpson's point, when he was saying everything's not a disciplinary issue, sometimes we adversely discipline children who actually can't do something. And that further traumatizes the child and changes their academic experience. So really thinking about like where the children are and what do they need, let's, assess that. And educators can do the same thing. But I often have a passion for working with teachers because the same way that I see educators feel about their students, the way that you guys are gushing about the things that you do for your kids, those are the same emotions that I like to see in teachers. And I realize that right now we're so focused on the children that the teachers are often forgotten, right? They're the ones doing all the work. They're the ones in the classrooms, either it's virtual or in the building, and they're not getting that support either. So I've made it a mission of my own, even as a business owner, to provide resources that are easy to access for teachers who are in these high needs, diverse school systems, so that they can better support parents and educators as well as the students that they serve. So all that to say, we have a lot of work to do. I think COVID has taught us a lot about what really matters, right? The core of what is important to us. And so it's our responsibility now as adults, as children, to figure out like, where are we going to go from here? Like, what are our next steps going to be? But I think starting with assessing where you are and validating what you feel is a great place to begin that process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Grisby. It becomes both and rather than either or. And we have to change that mindset to be able to embrace that. Deborah, final thoughts for you as well. Moving forward, what are some of the things, in your opinion, to look at as we redesign education, teaching, and learning for post-pandemic?
First of all, thank you so much again for the opportunity. The preacher's kid in me wants to remind us all of John 3:16, that God so loved the world that he gave. And preeminent above everything, curriculum, CCRPI, and we've said it and reiterated it, is that we have to be in it as educators, as parents, as stakeholders, with loving our children and making decisions, leading with love, leading with that compassion, which allows us to so effortlessly show that grace and that mercy and that compassion. And so as we transition out of the pandemic, and I do speak that we are transitioning out of the pandemic, we're going to have to love our children back into the building, love them into what is going to become new normal, love our teachers. And thank you, Dr. Grisby. I salute the teachers who have been so flexible and having to switch and change from face to face to, synchronous, asynchronous, and simultaneous, and having to handle all of that. And all of the educators that have stood on the wall for our children. I just want to remind everyone that it must all begin with that love, that same John 3:16 love that Christ modeled for us.
Well, thank you so much for that, Deborah. And again, speak those things as though they are. So we need to definitely put it out there. Raquel, what's your opinion in terms of how we move or transition out of this pandemic, the ways in which we need to look at education, teaching, and learning?
Well, thank you. I have truly enjoyed myself, and it has been a pleasure. I will say to our parents, lay a strong foundation. Lay a strong spiritual foundation for your kids before they enter a building. In Henry County, we are already in the building, but we do have hybrid options. So once you've done that, that teaches a kid who they are and what are the expectations you have for your family. What is the kid expectation for themselves? Those are important conversations that we need to get back around the kitchen table and have before we even load up in our cars and come to the building. So that's just the cry that I have for our parents, but the cry that I have for our students. Be okay with accepting love. Know what it feels like when someone is reaching out to you to love you, to guide you. And I think sometimes our kids don't even realize it when we have it in the front of their face. Because sometimes our kids come in the building with the weight of the world on their shoulders. And just a simple hello can do such good. But when they don't even say it back to you, because they can't even hear you and understand that that's love. That's a greeting. I'm glad to see you. And when our kids can't respond to that, we do have a lot of work to do. But guess what? It's what we must do.
Operating from our gift.
Absolutely. That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. Absolutely. We are God's children.
Amen to that.
Excellence. Of excellence.
There you go.
God bless.
Thank you. Shakira? What would be your thoughts on that? Final thoughts on how we approach teaching and education and learning as we transition out of this pandemic?
Well, just to echo, and again, thank you so much. It's always an honor. That's to echo the panel, love, because you have to be around love to see love and understand love and to receive love, first and foremost. But in the educational sense, there's always been a focus on literacy. If this pandemic hasn't shown us anything, it's shown us that we have to kind of switch that focus to math and science. And so that we can just understand the basic mathematical reasoning of some things and now understand the science of things. And also critical thinking. All the literature and articles that we're seeing now being published about where do we go now from now with our kids, we're talking about problem solving and collaboration. Colleges and employers are saying they need for our scholars now to come out of high school or college with problem solving abilities and being able to collaborate with teams. So moving forward, once we come back into the building full time face to face, we're going to have a lot of problem solving activities, collaborative assignments for our kids to do because we cannot go back to school pre-COVID. It would never look that way again in our building. So those are some things we're going to do to prepare our kids for those jobs that haven't even been created yet. So our focus will start to shift towards that way. So
Thank
again,
you so
thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and thank you. And final comments to you, Dr. Simpson.
Yes, and I got about 45 seconds, so I'm going to be fast. First, my shout outs and acknowledging National Women's Month and the privilege and honor to be with such beautiful sisters. Hey, I'm delighted and elated at the experience. Secondly, we talk about SEL, and I want to just acknowledge the fact that the godfather of SEL is an African American man by the name of Dr. James Comer. He's the first full-time professor at Yale University. He actually did the research to spearhead the work of social emotional learning in New Haven, Connecticut, in an urban city school district back in the 70s. That laid the platform for what SEL looks like today. While Castle is the gold standard, it was Dr. James Comer who is the father of SEL. So I wanted to point that out. And then lastly, as the deputy superintendent for school improvement and the school leadership and improvement, I want to say this. Look, I want our children to come back and just be able to have fun. Yes. We spent all this time talking about socially distancing, and I want to tell you about we need to change that and start talking about physically distancing, because we don't need to distance ourselves socially. We need physical distancing. But I just want our children to get back into the routine of having fun and socializing, because that is going to come, that the content is going to come. We hear all this about learning loss. So I'm going to caution all of us to make sure that we allow children that space and that place to just be able to love, as as Ms. Rice said, just to be able to love and grow and just feel and care about each other, because that has been taken away so much. I don't want them to be greeted at the schoolhouse door with learning loss and remediation and acceleration. I want them greeted with love, and I want them greeted with fun, and I want them to go back through the process again of what it's like to play tag on the blacktop and all of those types of things that they were excited about coming to school for, so that they could socially distance. So they wouldn't have to social distance, but that physical distance that we've got to create. So that's what I'm excited most about. And if we do that, the learning is gonna come. That's gonna come, but we've got to meet them face to face. We got to just slap them in the face with some love, some care, and some concern, because once you've built that relationship and that foundation that's based on those, then everything else is truly going to come. So I want to thank you all again for this. Has truly been this is a good start. This is a great start to my weekend. I mean, I'm just I'm so excited to be with you all, and please, just continue the great work that you all are doing.
Well, the great work goes to all of you, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your participation. You talk about that blacktop, Dr. Simpson. Don't let me start talking double Dutch over here. But once again, thank you so much to each and every one of you on this panel. I thank you for your time and your attention, and our kids are in good hands. So let's just remember the basics. The greatest commandment tells us to love, and that seems to be where we're ending on. So thank you all. Have a great evening. Good night, and God bless.